I want to get back, NK Singh, you've been a part of 8 budget-making exercises. How difficult or challenging was it for Mr. Jaitley to have not repealed that very controversial retrospective tax? He went so far and yet he did not grab the opportunity. It is here to stay. He may not use it, yes, but this controversial tax does live and hound us.
Well, let me say this. Mr. Jaitley has done what can reasonably be expected. And I think he has taken quite an audacious step in terms of suggesting that in future, this government does not intend to resort to any retrospective taxation. There will be stability in the tax regime. His repeated references to advanced tax ruling, both in terms of direct, indirect taxes, and laying down certain norms for transfer pricing. And I believe that his clear statement that disputes which have arisen from the past application would be subjected to a fast-track alternative dispute resolution mechanism, which is what is implied. I think these are very audacious, forward-looking steps. And I think that the investor community, both in this country and all over, must be assured by this categorical assurance of the finance minister, which of course underpins broadly speaking, a growth in terms of restoring macroeconomic stability. I agree with Jayant. And in terms of taking on a fiscal target, which is a somewhat daunting fiscal target, I agree with Moody's assessment, but that's a challenge he has taken on. And he intends to fulfill this challenge by a combination, no doubt, of monetary and fiscal measures. The key, of course, is rekindling the investment saving cycle.
We leave it on that note. Out of time here. Thank you so much for joining in with that perspective, and that's a perspective that we really need. Someone like Supriya pointed out who's worked on 8 budgets, the view coming in from NK Singh. But Jayant, I want to bring it back to you, and I want your reaction to what Atsi spoke. The fact that even that Moody's believe that that 4.1% is going to be very tough to achieve. The government had the luxury of probably erring a little bit on the side of caution. Maybe they could have gone for a 4.3% target that would have looked a little more credible as well. Why do you think that the government chose to stick to that 4.1% line?
It's very much because of the long-term roadmap. I mean, ultimately, we want to get to the FRBM targets of 3%. As the lady from Moody's correctly said, even at 3%, the numbers are much too high. So we really want to create that glide path that brings us down from 4.1% to 3%. If we had gone to 4.3 or 4.4%, it would become even harder to get down to 3%. So I think that's one very important point. The other important point to recognize here is that Mr. Jaitley has laid out this idea of an expenditure management commission, which is going to look into how to actually streamline and rationalize government expenditures, particularly on the subsidy side. I think that's a very important step on expenditure and subsidy management. So I think that will make a big difference in really providing us details on the quality of fiscal consolidation. And I think that's very valuable in laying all of that out. In addition, I think it's very important to recognize that the measures to stimulate growth, and particularly in terms of what's being done or anticipated in the financial sector, both in terms of recapitalizing the banks as well as in terms of infrastructure financing. And if you look at the investment trusts, if you look at the fact that 10,000 crores has been set aside for venture capital and so on, and you see all the measures that have been put in place for the financial sector to invest in infrastructure, to get the private investment cycle going, that gives you a lot of confidence that that 5.4 to 5.9% growth number will in fact be achieved. If that growth number is achieved, we have the expenditure management commission, then I think that quality of that fiscal consolidation at 4.1% to 3.6% and 3% becomes very, very good. And that's why I think this budget has done such a masterful job of getting out of the fiscal trap that we are in and positioning the economy very firmly on a fast growth trajectory.
I said Jayant Sinha speaks a language that markets understand, and I perhaps have been proven right. But Atsi Shade, I'm going to come back to you. Jayant, speaking about the fiscal consolidation roadmap, 3.6%, next fiscal 3%, the fiscal after that. You raised the whole point of the quality of fiscal deficit. You've got an explanation from an insider, if I may, as far as Jayant Sinha is concerned. Are you convinced?
Well, India has brought down its deficits in the past. So this is certainly not something that would be unique in the country's own history. And I think it would, again, depend on the measures that were taken. If the political wherewithal is there to take expenditure measures, particularly with regard to subsidies, that would certainly not only help in terms of the fiscal deficit itself, it would also remove distortions in the macroeconomy, distortions, like I said, that promote demand without creating the conditions for supply to meet that demand. And I think subsidies are a good example of that. There's also other kinds of expenditure which goes into areas like health, education, sanitation, that is laudable, but is not very efficient. So if there were measures taken that, may not do anything to cut down the expenditure, but merely target it correctly, that again would help in terms of the macroeconomic distortions and later on in terms of fiscal deficit. So I think, yes, it's believable if these measures are indeed taken, if they were implemented as planned, they would definitely have the effect of reducing the fiscal deficit and, importantly, reducing macroeconomic imbalances and then taking the country to a level of growth that is not just higher, but more sustainable and more efficient. But again, it's all in the implementation, and we don't have proof of that, but we're 6 weeks into the new government, so we recognize that. If indeed all of these things are implemented, I think the effect would definitely be positive.
Atsi, thank you so much for joining in with that perspective there. That's the Moody's view on the budget. But Jayant, I want to come back to you then. Let's talk about missed opportunities. And I want to understand, are these issues that could potentially be addressed outside of the budget? There was expectation that there would be some big bang incentives for the manufacturing sector, that we could be looking at big ticket labor reforms, that we could be, something that hasn't been touched upon in the past, land reforms as well, some commentary on those, on that direction as well. Nothing really as far as, concrete steps to revive manufacturing, one will have to say. Is that because the government was short on time and these are issues that will be addressed outside of the budget, or does that not occupy mind space for the government?
Well, I think obviously it's too early to be able to tackle all of these difficult issues all at one go in the budget. I think reform is, of course, a continuous process, and we've already demonstrated that even in the 6 weeks that we've been in office, that we have been taking bold action on a variety of different measures, whether it's what Rajasthan is doing in terms of labor reform, whether it's the Minister for Highways talking about, amending and possibly reworking the Land Acquisition Act. So clearly there's a lot of thinking and a lot of effort underway to tackle these very difficult issues as far as the economy is concerned. I will add another aspect to this conversation that we've really not been touching on, which is that if you look at the budget and thematically consider what the budget is really communicating to the markets, to the business community, that is very much a sort of a pro-market stance, because what we've really identified and shown is that the things that are holding back the economy right now are the tax regime, which is making it difficult to do business because of retroactive taxation, generally regulations and various types of measures that are inhibiting investment, and of course various different bottlenecks as far as financing is concerned. And in that sense, what the government is saying is that, look, we're here to facilitate, we're here to make sure that business can do what business does best, which is to go out and invest in projects, to build businesses and create jobs. We're here to facilitate and to make all of that happen, and we're going to remove the impediments. We're going to work damn hard, whether it's on the financing side, whether it's in the ease of doing business, whether it's on the taxation side, whether it's in provision of public goods such as infrastructure, to really make it possible for the investment cycle to take off and for business to get going. So I think the overall message, and I think this is what the markets are really responding to, is that India is genuinely open for business, and you have a government that is willing to sit down with business, work with them shoulder to shoulder to remove these impediments and make sure that we can get this economy moving again. And I think that is the big overall message from this budget.
And that message has been well taken by the markets. But Mrs. Sinha, if I may ask you a quick question on FDI. Again, a community that is rather excited about investing in India. A lot of people here on our panel said that
object was to revive the economy. The manufacturing sector has to grow. We didn't want to burden the common man. We had to clear up a lot of issues unresolved which the UPA had left behind. So finding a resolution to those issues, giving a fillip to infrastructure, to the manufacturing sector, and also containing the fiscal deficit. Not by raising higher taxes, but both to the average man, citizen, the taxpayer, as also the manufacturing sector, giving a more rational duty structure. Now we tried to follow that course, and I do hope this leads to the expansion of the economy. without burdening the common man.
All right, Mr. Arun Jaitley making his first comments after presenting his maiden budget speech. You heard him first on ET. Now, Jayant, I was asking you this question. A lot of people here on the panel believed we're going to let you go right after this one. FDI in defense, 49% is what the cap is now at. It still doesn't give the big guys who may want to come in complete control. And which is why a lot of people here believe this is a half-hearted attempt, one that will perhaps not woo the big bucks. How would you defend that position?
No, I think we have had, in fact, a policy across many sectors where we open up the sector through a series of steps, because you always want to do it in a calibrated way, graduated way, to understand how it's working out, what the issues are. And so I think, going from 26%, which is where I believe FDI in defense manufacturing was, to 49% is a good step forward. It will enable us to really take stock after a year or two to see how things are going. And if need be, we can certainly expand those limits once again. Clearly, we've shown that to be the case in insurance, where we've gone from 26 to 49%. So, typically calibrated liberalization, doing things in a methodical, systematic way is usually the best way to enable everybody to adjust and to make the appropriate investments. And I think the finance minister has demonstrated that as well. And as you heard from his comments, and as I was saying earlier, the key here really is to get growth going, and at the same time not to burden the common man. And so it's that what you have to balance, while at the same time making sure that you've done the macroeconomic stabilization that's required to ensure that the overall framework is in place to allow people to invest and do their business in a stable and orderly way.
The first reaction from BJP to Modi government's maiden budget, exclusive here on ET Now. Jayant Sinha, appreciate you taking the time and joining us here at ET Now with that perspective. And I'm sure markets are taking note of those comments that are coming in from the BJP.